Welcome to Recovery His Way. I'm Tom Reynolds, director at His Way, and we're on the campus of His Way campus over here in Northeast Huntsville. And we're joined today by a newer resident in our program, Jordan Campbell. Jordan's been with us a little over 30 days. We've had the opportunity to talk to some guys who have had long-term experiences with us, but Jordan's new to us, and I wanted to kind of get that fresh perspective today as we share with you. Jordan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
I guess to get started, I'd be just interested in kind of what brought you to His Way in the first place. Why His Way? Why now? What kind of led up to this? Why this choice?
Well, about April 11th is whenever I had been struggling with heroin addiction. I was using the needle and everything, and April 11th I had a really bad OD, and that was a really, big awakening for me. After I got out of the hospital is whenever I realized it was time for me to change. My mom heard about it. Thankfully, I hadn't been in any legal trouble yet, but talking to her about it just kind of seemed to open it for me. And shortly after that, I became septic and went to the hospital after 2.5 weeks of being septic. And I think by June 15th was whenever I first went to the hospital. It turns out I had endocarditis, which is a staph infection of the tricuspid valve in my heart. And so originally I had 8 millimeters of vegetation and 4 millimeters of vegetation. And so thankfully now I still have 5 millimeters, but they've gotten it all down. I spent 9.5 weeks in the hospital with a PICC line doing IV antibiotics. And so in there, it's normally pretty life-threatening. And originally it was going to be an open heart surgery type thing to fix it, but they decided to wait, and so that's still, up on the table for it. But while I was in there, I started rebuilding relationships with my family, especially with my mom, and being open with her. I also built a relationship with my case manager, Michelle, at there, and my other nurse, Susan, who was actually at my family meeting. And, I just realized it was time for a change in there. Mainly, I think if I wouldn't have gotten it, that's what I've spoken about in class, is kind of a blessing to have gotten it. Even though it's a very serious thing that I'll probably have to live with for the rest of my life. I feel that without it, I wouldn't have came here and been able to start living my life through Christ. But I think with that is the main reason why I came here. Before that, I had my friend Jacob Smith came through, and so that's how I've heard about the program. And even before then, whenever my addiction first started, I talked to a guy named Blake, who is a drummer at a church in, I think, Decatur area now. He came through the program really early on, years ago. And so it was just time. It was time for a change. I didn't like how my life was going. The depression I had already tried to commit suicide with that OD, is what happened April 11th. And it just, I knew I needed to change, but I didn't see a way out. But that's what thankfully led me here.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to ask you a few questions. I mean, your story is fascinating. You said that when you had this overdose, was that intentional? You were trying to take your life, or is that accidental? I know obviously we've lost a lot of guys over the years to accidental overdoses. Was your intention? Was it intentional, or? It
was that day. I don't even know what caused it, really. It was kind of like a normal day. I mean, I was still, I was struggling with depression and everything. It wasn't a good day, but that's what's weird is it was nothing out of the ordinary. And then I went and bought some and went up to my apartment, and it just felt different. Like it's a really weird feeling. And I loaded up in there about, I think, 3.5, 4 times more than what I normally did. And the dude that I bought it from even warned me before to not even do half of what I normally did. And I think it proved in itself how strong it was. They ended up using, it was 6 Narcan total, I think, but one was administered by a pedestrian, but the others were administered by the EMTs. wasn't funny, but it was a very scary feeling whenever I came back. Of course, I was freezing. They had cut off my shirt and everything. I think they were doing the sternum rubs while they were doing the Narcan. And whenever they started wheeling me down because I was in an upstairs apartment. There was actually another stretcher. I remember this vividly. The stretchers that they put you on whenever they have the body bags in them, they don't have the padding that your stretcher is that you lay on. And so those were at the bottom of the steps. And so I don't know if it was just to scare me. There was definitely a lot of EMTs there, but I took that one to heart which is a really weird thing. And that's the thing that's bothered me, is that like I wouldn't have, after that day, I haven't had any suicidal thoughts or anything. I think the depression was still there. The substance abuse was still there. But that was one thing. That's another blessing, even though it's a very, traumatic type deal thing. But it was definitely a blessing because it took that away. And I had been struggling with that for about a year and a half. And that was the most, I guess, as close to successful attempt that I could have made to actually commit suicide. But before then, I had other attempts where I knew I took too much of whatever, and then just woke up and then just dealt with it. That time, whenever I loaded up, I didn't think it was possible to come back from that. I think I was told I actually had the carfentanil in it, which it's a stronger version of fentanyl, and so. But that one was really a traumatic thing. And it was weird. This is another thing that I brought up. I don't know how I feel about coincidences. I don't know what I believe in towards that. But I know whenever I was at the hospital that time, a nurse put her cross necklace around my neck and was just telling me her story and everything. And the EMT that was transporting me to the hospital was telling me he has a girlfriend, or maybe he just got engaged to her, that she struggles with addiction to cocaine, and was just talking. But those two people just stood out because everybody else, they weren't treating me bad, but they were just working on me. I was just another statistic to them, yeah. And but they stuck out, and they stuck out in the whole conversation. But the reason why they both stuck out is because it was like they were preaching to me, which in a good sense. I know normally people say preaching to me in a bad sense, but right. And I can remember that vividly. And what's even weirder is I can't remember the days after that. It takes a toll on your body. So, and I just thought that was a weird coincidence. Right. And then the next time, whenever I got put in the hospital, whenever I went septic, and got diagnosed with endocarditis, whenever I went to the LTAC facility, my case manager, Michelle, she did the same thing, put her cross necklace around my neck. But what's even weirder about both these is I hope I don't get her in trouble for this if somebody says it, but with HIPAA, you can't give or receive gifts. So I couldn't give any of my nurses a gift, and they couldn't give me gifts, and that's considered a gift. So both of them, shortly, I think I had it on for maybe like an hour total. Both of them, I guess whoever was the charge nurse came in and said they had to take it from me, so they had to take it back off of me. But I just thought that was a really, powerful thing. It definitely helped me in that sense.
And I think you really speak to something that I think is powerful to me, is that you see how God's at work at all this, that it's not just coming to a Christ-centered residential program in which you get exposed to the hope and the message of the gospel, but you're seeing it in nurses and MC workers and all those people around you that come and bring their faith into their profession, however they use it. And I think that's a testimony to them and to the power of the gospel and the influence it has had on you. The one thing I was trying to just build a connection with, you talk about your overdose that obviously took you initially in the hospital, and then turning septic and the issues with your heart. Were those two things connected, or are those two completely separate things, or how does that work in your situation?
Well, medically wise, I guess I had the endocarditis, which is the staph buildup in my heart, for a couple months. There's a form of endocarditis that's pretty immediate. I think we actually had another resident here. He was talking to me about it. His was immediate. And so there was no staph cluster buildup in his heart, but he was diagnosed with endocarditis, which I think the medical term is the inflammation of the heart valve, which is normally caused by infection. But so the early one is it's easier to treat because, say if you were to use and you go septic right then, they can treat it. And so, it still takes, I think he was on antibiotics for 9 months, but I know he kind of went back to it during those 9 months because they had sent him home with the PICC line, which is one thing that I remember we were fighting with insurance. Insurance was trying to send me home with a PICC line, and I was like, because I didn't know if I could go back home to my parents' house. Now whether would have been safe or not from using again, I don't really know. Thankfully, I was able to stay in the hospital, but I know if my mom wasn't ready for me to go home and I went home with that PICC line, it would have been bad.
Bad how?
I would have definitely went back to using again. That's another thing that's weird. After the depression got healed a little bit, and definitely the suicidal urges get taken away with the OD. That's how powerful I've noticed my addiction is. Because I remember I would always say that I could quit whenever I want to, or I'll know when I'm ready to quit. But sadly, that's the thing with the epidemic we have going on right now, is because it's probably going to be a while before you're ready to quit, and you won't make it there, especially nowadays. And so I believe that they even told me in my doctor's appointment yesterday that if I go back to using again, it very well could be the last time. If I go back to, and that's just one time, just getting high one time with the needle. If it doesn't kill me, then it probably, restart the infection. But I know now my urges have been taken away. I don't have any, any strong urges like I did early on, and I'm learning to, deal with them here. But I know whenever I was in the hospital, there were so many times where I just wanted to leave, knowing what it would do to me, and still go use, because it's a lot of stress, coming towards you. And so that's how it would have been bad. It's because if I would have sent home with the PICC line, I probably would have stopped taking the antibiotics. I wouldn't have set up the appointment, and I wouldn't be here right now. And I think that shows how powerful the addiction is in it. But yeah.
Okay. Well, and so it sounds like to me in some ways that your overdose kind of got you medical attention for these other things that eventually they addressed with your heart and those kind of things that you've kind of gone down that path. Is that?
Well, the overdose, I was only in hospital for about two days, going over to 2 days. Now with that, I went back home. I noticed I wasn't feeling good, but with the stuff that I was doing with my drug addiction, you're not going to feel good at any time. Right. And so you really, I wasn't worried about how I felt. But no, it wasn't until I want to say 2 weeks after that I became septic. And so the endocarditis, like I said, had been there for months, even before the overdose. Right. But it's the symptoms of the endocarditis is lack of energy. I think the sleep gets affected. It's just mild symptoms. For something very severe, it has mild symptoms. Right. Now, whenever you go septic, of course, that's a whole nother ballgame. Sure. Whenever I went to the hospital after becoming septic, I think my first temperature there was 105.6. Wow. And that was with taking fever reducers and everything. So I knew, and I was septic for about a full 2 weeks before I went. And this is another thing. It wasn't funny, but I remember sitting there on the couch, and with COVID going on, and especially I hadn't even touched a mask till I went to the hospital. And so that was with months of going on with COVID, and I wasn't really worried about it. But I remember sitting there, and I was like, well, if this is COVID, it's a lot worse than what they're saying on TV, because it was very bad. But yeah, those were two separate things. So it was kind of, the overdose helped me with the mental aspect, and like I know without the overdose, you know, I probably would still be out there using, and just like without the endocarditis. But I think with them, as you know, with both of them happening, even though they're pretty bad events happening, like I keep saying, it was a blessing for both those to happen in such a quick time span.
Right. Well, and you bring up something that we really have never talked about, but I think is interesting, is that, you know, when you're in the cycle of using and then coming down off it and kind of going through the physical withdrawals and then using again and going through that whole cycle, your body's in such chaos anyway that when you have a medical situation that's bad, you may not even notice it, because I mean, you're going through so much chaos anyway with your body, whether you have a temperature or not, whether you feel like your lack of energy, all these different things you could be having, is you wouldn't notice them. And so you could have easily continued on and obviously had these things happen and took your life, that you wouldn't have been paying attention to without some sobriety. And so I think that's a danger that a lot of people do face out there using, is that they're not tending to themselves, they're not getting help that they need, they're not getting medical attention because, you know, they're in such a chaos under the addiction problem already. Well, one of the things I was wanting to talk about too is obviously you chose to come here. You had some friends who'd been here. Your mom was familiar with this program. She had friends that were, I know you mentioned your nurse was familiar with us and that type of thing. What did you expect would happen coming to His Way? And I guess a follow-up to that is, has it gone as expected?
Well, what I expected to happen, I don't want to say it was for my mom, because it was for myself as well, or for my whole family. Because once I was, you know, clear-headed in the hospital, I was able to see, like, especially with how whenever she first walked in, and I was a little bit yellow from the jaundice. I was in liver and kidney failure from the sepsis as well, or my kidneys were about to be in failure, but definitely liver failure. And I guess, you know, with how sick I was, it was just all the right thing. I was really emotional because I just couldn't imagine. I remember that night I had a dream, because she was able to come the second day, and I had a dream where I had a kid, and I had to watch him go through the same things that, you know I've been through. And to come see, because I knew what I looked like. I was 176 pounds. I was yellow. I was like gray. My skin was, you know, just really bad. And that ended up, you know, getting fulfilled whenever she came in, and I could just tell by the way, you know, she was looking at me. It was just only hurt to see where, and especially with, you know, I think, I just felt really bad, because I could tell that she was, you know, blaming herself for, you know, for going through, for what I was going through.
Right.
But I pretty much was ready for, you know, anything. I knew I couldn't do it on my own. I knew you know, if I go back to using, I would just, you know, die. And I didn't want to. I've always wanted to die for, you know, something that was worth it, you know, and that's just not worth it to me.
Right. So in coming here, then coming to His Way, obviously we're a Christ-centered residential recovery program. Was the Christian part of it a reason for it? Was that part of your thought process? And kind of, you know, what have you experienced since you've been here? I mean, has your expectations been fulfilled? Has there been things that you were hoping would happen, didn't, or how'd that go?
Well, whenever I originally was coming to here, that wasn't, you know, it was something I was open to. You know, I've never been too much involved in church. If I went, then, you know, it was for all the other reasons, for whether it's a girl or for my mom, because mom wanted us to. And I've noticed that before I came here, I wasn't ready. I wouldn't pay attention and everything. I wouldn't say I was a non-believer, but, you know, just like everybody else, you know, I had my doubts, different situations. I would just be, you know, I would become a non-believer with certain situations, and other situations it would just, you know, too much too much, I guess, coincidences that, where it would push me on the other side. But now, I think that was the main thing with coming here. This was I knew I know one thing that made me definitely come here is that it was a 6 months long to a year program, whereas all the other programs that everyone else was telling me about was only 30 days. And that was one thing for me, which I know you learn stuff in each program, but I think by then I had been in a hospital for about 30 days and I was nowhere near ready to be done with it. And so 30 days just wasn't long enough. But the Christ-centered, this being a Christ-centered program, I wouldn't say that had any effect on me coming here originally, but like I said, I was just, really open to it. But whenever I came here, I definitely, as for my expectations with coming here, they were completely, like, I expected to, see it through and, do good. I didn't really know what to expect, though. In fact, I didn't really learn too much about how the day-to-day is because I didn't want to, make myself too overwhelmed. Because I know once I start something, I normally see it through. Like, I won't quit doing anything. But if I hear, say if there's a rule that I don't like before I came here, that would hinder me from going. Right. So, but as for that, it was completely different from what I expected, but in a good way. And so that finally feels good because normally stuff doesn't go how you expect in a bad way. But this, it was definitely a lot different. I just feel like, especially with how I felt before, I didn't think I'd feel like this, ever again. With learning God and trying to, live my best like Christian life for Him. I never thought I don't think anyone in my family thought they'd see today, or which I don't really have too many friends anymore, if any, but nobody would have expected, this for me. In fact, I was always against rehab in general. I just didn't believe in it. I thought it was another way for someone to start a business and make money. But that's what's completely turned me around here. I don't even know how to describe it, but it's such a powerful program that we have here, especially with, like, I've noticed, one, I could tell immediately is because there's not been a single class that if I'm asleep, like tired before I go to class, going into class wakes me up because it's something, and that's something that really spoke to me, even though it's something so small. It's because all through high school, all through any school that I've been to, any class that I've been to, even any church that I've been to before then or before now, I realized that, I wasn't able to pay attention, and not really intentionally, but it would just happen without me even being able to like catch it. But here, especially with your class and with everyone else's, I'm glued in and I'm able to absorb the information. And that was one thing I was worried about coming here is, without taking any ADHD or ADD medication, would I be able to? And this is how I actually realized that was just a crutch, really. But at the same time, with this being classes that I actually, enjoy, and that I know I need, it's helped me be able to pay attention a lot. And so it's definitely been completely different than what I expected. I don't really know what I expected, but I knew, anything was better than what I was doing. So
I know we just had your family meeting last Friday, and it was neat to see your family and be able to interact with them and have that conversation with them and hear more about your journey there, and to see their joy in the things you're doing now and where you're at, and feeling a lot similar, that they didn't think they'd ever see you in the mindset and condition that you're in today. Is a joy to them, as certainly I know is to you and to us. You've been here, you were here about a week when you decided to be baptized, if I remember correctly. And I'm interested in that's pretty quick considering those kind of all new to you. I was just interested in kind of what prompted that. I realized there had been a lot of events in your life that had kind of set up that are really, challenging events. I mean, huge life-turning events with overdoses and heart problems and those kind of things. But I was interested in is there a real trigger that happened there for you that made you make that decision to, not just, be in a Christian program, but actually commit yourself to this way of life?
Well, I know one thing really, really early on, like my first couple of days, I was having a very, very hard time adjusting with, anxiety. I don't know if it's from being in a hospital or from, just being in a new place in general. I know all that played a factor into it. And I noticed, I think it was Tuesday, so the day after my second day here, I forgot who was the first person that I've heard say it, but they were talking and said, my way didn't work before this. And, that registered to me, but I didn't really think that out until later on. And so throughout that whole week up until whenever I got baptized, I was trying to really just break that down in my head because I still wasn't adjusting. I was trying to do everything, in my power to adjust. Normally I was trying to, talk to people and, make those relationships, because I think that was the main thing, is being around completely new guys and everything like that. And so I think with that, I kind of applied that to my situation with, my way didn't work. All the way down to that, because normally you say my way didn't work with, like, say whenever I moved to Decatur to work for a tree service and was sober for several months, but eventually went back to it. And so that's the way that we normally talk about and use that phrase. But I started applying it to everything. And, I noticed that no matter who I started talking with and everything like that, I still wasn't sleeping. I'd start sweating no matter where I was, no matter how cold or hot I was, just from the anxiety that I was having. And so finally, I think it was about the fourth or fifth day, and it was a couple of days before I got baptized, I just started praying. And, that's one thing that I've never tried, which is the, basis of the phrase, my way didn't work. And so I talked with Mr. Jim Norval, and he told me to, pray before bed, before I eat, which we all do that. We all pray in the morning, but I pray whenever I wake up, just by myself. And, it seemed to start, everything started falling into place just slowly. It didn't happen, immediately, but I felt, more strength in that than I did with anything that I would have tried. And so I know Pat, he actually was the one that raised his hand, and he quoted the scripture and said he wanted to get baptized. And then he asked if anyone else would like to be baptized with him. And so we had been learning about it. Of course, I knew what getting baptized meant. But that's what made me, I raised my hand, and then I actually went and I talked to, I talked to John Brown about it. I talked to one other resident here, and just because it was early on, I don't know if it was my anxiety or not, but I kind of felt, because everybody knew I hadn't been in a church or anything, I felt, like people were like, why are you getting baptized so early? But I'm glad you actually said in class today that it was, a better decision to do it early on whenever I need the help, because I know I still need the help, but I know I needed it a lot more then. At least now I can, I can breathe, I can sleep better. But that's what led me to do that in the first place. That was my first time I was baptized. And I think that's what really started changing It started helping me change the way I think. And so I've really started hitting it hard after that.
Good. That's awesome. Well, my last question is, you're still early in the program, obviously. You're just getting ready to start looking for a job and those kind of things are starting. As you look into the future, what hopes do you have? What do you anticipate? What kind of hopes do you have as you look out into your future now?
Well, I know one thing that has been on my mind as for going into the future is one, helping the new guys that come in. Like we have a new resident now that was having a hard time, and he's young and he's still adjusting, and so that's one thing that I hope to actually be able to do. But as for myself and my future is just continue on through the program. I think the daily Bible, you read a chapter a day and you finish it within a year. Which I'll probably end up staying for the full year. But I want to finish that before I leave here. And that'll definitely be not a challenge. Well, it would be a challenge for me to keep up. I'm not a big fan of reading. That would be the first book I've read in my life by myself.
Okay.
And so
that's a good one.
I've heard. But other than that, I'm still, rebuilding relationships with my family, and I'm hoping to just go through the program and get everything I can out of it, and build up a future, build a good relationship with the church. I've already met the elders at Central, and thankfully, I know my mom was going to a different church. I don't know if they were still having services, but thankfully, I have the full support of my family, because I expected I expected our conversation about what church to go to end up in not an argument, but you know what I mean? Like, she's already been going to the church, but I expected to, have some talk over that. But thankfully, I said I'd like to stay at Central. I met the elders of the church, and, this is it's what literally has let me live, but gave me a whole nother life. And so I'm hoping it will be able to keep doing that through the relationships I build there. And so thankfully, immediately she said that, that was okay, and everybody was okay with going every Sunday. And so that's pretty much it as for that.
Good. Well, Jordan, I appreciate you joining us today, and thanks for sharing your story. I mean, it's quite a story. I know it's still early on, so I'm excited to see where all this will take us and what we'll enjoy together for years to come. So thanks for sharing with us today, and look forward to staying a part of the journey.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. If you want more information on His Way, you can check out our website at hiswayinc.org.